early payments. I know you went through the bi-weekly payment setup. Are we going to be doing any early payment of that? We didn't do that. Like an early payment example? Bi-weekly,
I don't think so. No. Okay. Officially 8 o'clock. So the plan today, if we can, we're going to try to get through the remainder of Chapter 6, take Quiz 4, then jump on into Chapter 9, take Quiz 5, and then depending on how we're doing on time, if we can get through Chapter 10, that would be ideal to be able to take Quiz 6. And the only reason we'd want to try to get through Quiz 6 today is because obviously you've got the test number 2 coming up next week that will cover basically quizzes 4, 5, and 6. And so I don't want to inherently postpone quiz 6 until next time, because then that would mean you'd be taking the quiz the same day as taking the test, and I would prefer not to do that. I think that's a good idea. So if we can get to it, we will. If we can't, we'll figure out another alternative solution. Okay, so here we go. Well, we've got about 5 more topics to get through on the Chapter 6 material. So the first one is one that we've already kind of done in one way or another, and that is the effect of below market financing on property values. Now this is the whole thing. You're going to see us, we're going to actually do a couple of different types of examples over the next couple of problems. This all boils down to, you've got a prevailing interest rate in the market right now, but you have somebody, for whatever reason, that's able to offer you below market financing, okay? Now what this might be is, all right, assume that I own a property that I'm trying to sell, and because I'm wanting to sell it, and I own it free and clear, I may be willing to provide seller financing to you as the purchaser. And if you were to go to a traditional bank, your interest rate could be higher than what I'm willing to offer you, okay? Could also be lower. But, you know, I may be looking at it from a standpoint, you know, as the property owner, that I'm actually willing to take a lower interest rate than maybe what the bank would be charging you, because I want a fixed income annuity for the next 15, 20, 30 years. Does that make sense? In other words, instead of selling the property outright and cashing out and having to take a capital gain right now, I might prefer to do more of an installment sale contract, which would mean that basically I'm seller financing it to you, you're making payments to me over the next 10, 15 years, and so I'm willing to accept a lower interest rate. Does that make sense? Okay. Now there's also a potential benefit to you as the buyer to maybe doing the seller financing, because if I'm seller financing it to you, I'm not going to place probably all the same restrictions on you as a traditional lender might, okay? In the event, like for example, if I'm selling you my property, do you think I care whether or not you get a survey on my property? No, I could care less. I'm selling it to you. I know that I own what I own, so why do I need to prove, you know, to anyone other than myself that obviously I'm selling the property? Do I care whether or not you get an appraisal or not? Of course not, because I've already set what my price is. I'm selling it to you. Do I care whether or not you get inspections on the property? Of course not. You know, so the point being is, if I'm selling it to you, it's on you in terms of the due diligence that you want to perform, you know, whenever buying the property. But from my perspective, as the seller of the property, I could care less about any of that. So right off the bat, you're probably going to have lower transaction cost of doing seller financing than you would going through a traditional lender. Does that make sense? Yes or no?
yes.
Now there's some pitfalls to that. That, you know, what if I'm a sleazy, you know, sort of seller of the property, and I'm trying to take advantage of you in some way, but by hiding some sort of material fact about the property that, you know, it's got environmental contamination, or it's got, you know, some sort of easement dispute, or it's got, you know, some other underlying issue that might make the value of the property less than what, you know, it truly, that I'm trying to maybe sell it for. But barring that, owner financing or seller financing can be a really advantageous sort of way to, in many cases, finance a property. In the context of the problem, We're just simply saying, I'm selling you a property and willing to do so at a lower interest rate, and what is the value, if you will, of that lower sort of cost to borrow. All right, so assume that we've got a traditional loan that is available to us for $100,000. And what do you say the prevailing rate of interest is? 7%. All right, and a term of, let's say, 15 years. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is just say, okay, under those circumstances, what's going to be our monthly payment? And so we get $898.83. Okay? Now, that's what the market is offering. All right? That's the market interest rate. I am saying I will offer you basically this property at a 5% interest rate. Okay? So if that's the case, how much is that going to adjust the payment to begin with? Okay? $790.79 would be the new payment. Okay, is everybody good with that? All right, so now we've established, okay, what the difference is, but what we really want to look at is to say, okay, well, what is going to be the actual difference there? So we'll just subtract one from the other. $108.04, okay, is going to be the difference. Okay, everybody good with that? Any questions so far? Okay, so now once we've got that and once we've got the difference, we could just simply say, all right, multiply that by 180 payments, ignoring time value of money just for a second, and just simply say what would be the actual cost savings. Okay, so $19,446.35 would be the raw savings, not applying any sort of time value of money, just simply saying what's the difference between the two payments over 15 years or 180 months, what would be the difference, okay? And so in essence, if we went with the owner financing or the seller financing at this lower interest rate, we would save ourselves out of pocket an absolute $19,446.55. Okay, everybody cool with that? Now, so first of all, if we're simply looking at, what is the effect of this below market financing on the property value, in one sense, we could actually pay, if we're looking at it just in raw dollars, not, once again, not adjusted for time value of money, we could actually pay something close to $19,000 more for the property to the owner of the property to get that below market financing. Does that make sense? And to be equivalent in terms of out-of-pocket cost. Does that make sense?
So for the buyer, it has two advantages. One is you're paying less for the loan. Second is
you can charge more for the property.
And so the seller is also making more money. He's making an extra 20 grand in a matter of 15 years that he wouldn't have, right?
Right. And possibly get a larger down payment. There's a whole variety of ways that you can kind of structure this, okay? All right. But if all we're really trying to do is to say, all right, what's going to be, I guess, the maximum or that we would potentially be willing to pay in addition, we could simply say, all right, let's take this 108.04, put that in as a payment for 15 years at 7% and solve for the present value. Now what that's going to do is that's going to tell us really the maximum that we could really truly pay if we're taking into account time value of money. So let me do that real quick. We get 12,000, 02009. Now, the reason obviously that's less than the 19,000 is because we are taking into account the effect of the time value of money. All right, and so in this case, what we are saying is we can feel fairly comfortable that we could spend an extra $12,000, or you could pay me an extra close to an extra $12,000, and you would in essence be break even, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to pay me the full $12,000. It could mean that you only pay me a fraction of that, okay? Or you don't pay me at all. But it's an issue of, well, what is the real value creation by virtue of getting that below market financing?
We can use, instead of the 108 payment to solve for the 12,000, we can use the 1946 as a future value.
Yeah, you probably could, and then discount it back. Okay. All right, any questions? Good? Make sense? Okay, moving forward. Okay, so the next one, home equity loans. Okay, this is an easy one. You're saying, yay. Okay. All right. So one of the things that you're able to do, and obviously this varies a little bit from state to state and that sort of thing, is you're able to borrow, once you've effectively purchased a home and you've built up a substantial amount of equity in that home, you are able to borrow a certain percentage of the value of that home as sort of a home equity line of credit. But this doesn't inherently mean that, okay, you've just gotten a home mortgage, you know, for virtually the full value of the property, and then, you know, 6 months later, all of a sudden, oh, I'm going to get a home equity line of credit. Chances are you don't have enough equity built up in the property in order to do that. This is usually the sort of thing that, you know, you've basically been in the property, you've been making payments for maybe the past 10, 15, maybe 20 years or more, or maybe you fully own the property outright. And this is an alternative to like a reverse mortgage, okay? This is a sort of situation where you're basically drawing out money in your property, you're gonna have to pay it back, okay? And so you're not necessarily gonna lose your property at the end of this unless you can't pay back whatever it is that you borrowed. Does that make sense, conceptually? All right? So in the scenario that we're gonna set up, we're gonna say that you purchased the home, let's say for $500,000. All right, and maybe you've got a $400,000 outstanding mortgage. All right, and in this case, the property, let's say, is currently worth $700,000.
Would that be market value?
Market value. Okay. And you can have a total debt ratio of 75%. So the question is, how large of a home equity loan could you get? Okay, does the question make sense? Okay, so what you're going to start off with is the current market value of the property of the $700,000, and you're going to multiply that by what? 75% to figure out what is the maximum that we can effectively borrow or have debt on. Okay, so 700,000 times 75%. So 525,000 is our maximum debt allowable. Okay, well, we already have 400,000 as an outstanding mortgage. So in essence, what that means is we have $125,000 of home equity available to borrow. Does that make sense? Okay, any questions about that? Yep.
So it's basically just like getting a credit card, but you're using
Yep.
your home as
Yep.
collateral?
Yep.
If you don't pay your credit card, just any normal credit card, is your house also collateral?
You know, normal credit card, your house is not going to be collateral. It's got
Yeah.
in this case, the home is tied to this particular line of credit. And so in the event that you don't pay it, then yes, your home is going to be subject to foreclosure.
And you
But
make
in a
monthly
normal,
payments?
like a consumer line of credit, those are just tied to your, basically your credit score and your, you know, traditional income. Okay? But the beauty of this is that in many cases, the interest rate at which you can borrow on a home equity line of credit is cheaper than what it is on, let's say, a consumer line of credit like with a traditional credit card.
Okay.
Because the lender is basically saying, we can take your house
Yeah.
and sell your house in the event that you don't pay back the home equity loan.
And do you make monthly payments, or you
Yes.
just sort of build it up?
No, pretty much make monthly payments.
Okay.
You potentially, excuse me, would go and just borrow 125,000, and then the loan payoff term might be 5 years, might be 10 years, whatever you work out with your lender. That's gonna, you know, once again depend on them, but it's now gonna be an extra payment that you're gonna have to make on top of your traditional mortgage.
Right.
But the idea is that you're able to access the lump sum. And so, you know, the normal traditional things that maybe, you know, get used for this is, you know, this is how, you know, a lot of folks may pay for their kids' college, or for weddings, or for unexpected expenses, or, you know, whatever it might be.
Okay.
Not saying it's an ideal solution, but it is one of the ways in which folks can access capital.
Okay.
The interest rate is certainly higher.
I'm sorry?
The interest rate is certainly higher in this case.
Well, it's usually low for the home equity loan, and it depending on the lender. Sometimes the home equity loan rate is going to be basically about the same as the actual traditional mortgage. Sometimes it will be a little bit higher, but it's usually almost always going to be less than whatever, like a traditional sort of consumer credit, like a normal line of credit that's not backed by anything. For example, if you just go out and you were to get a line of credit from a bank with nothing as collateral, it's going to have a much higher interest rate than what this would, as a general rule. Okay? Now, there are always exceptions, because there are some lenders that are, once again, pretty unscrupulous that will say, oh yeah, we'll give you a home equity loan and we'll charge you a ridiculously high interest rate to do so. Okay? Yep.
Just a quick question, mortgage interest deduction on that.
Yep.
I know there's a lot of variables that come into play, but typically, I've seen in the past, I don't know what legislation has done since, you could, but who knows now? Any thought?
All that's changing,
Yeah.
clearly. You know, in the past, you have been able to deduct, you know, the full dollar amount of the primary mortgage and secondary mortgages that you have against the property. Going forward, you know, well, it's actually a great discussion to get into in the real estate investment course, because when we're talking about a lot of those issues, but specifically, you know, with this new proposed piece of legislation, you know, what they're doing is they're basically raising the standard deduction dramatically, like doubling it, which pretty much means that the average ordinary homeowner is really not going to get the benefit of any sort of deduction at all.
Right.
And which is fine in one sense, but it's gonna have an impact, you know, clearly on the housing market from the standpoint that no longer is there going to be this implicit benefit of basically buying a home and getting that home interest deduction, being able to deduct your property taxes, being able to deduct, you know, a whole number of other things. Okay. All right.
Are there any financing fees involved in home equity?
I'm sorry, what,
Any financing fees involved in that?
any financing feasible?
Fees
Oh,
involved.
fees, I'm sorry. Depends on the lender. In some cases, no. In some cases, it's a very straightforward kind of just, you know, you walk in and simple transaction. In other cases, with some lenders, they're gonna require, you know, a full appraisal of the property. But in a lot of cases with these, they'll do just a simple, kind of almost drive-by appraisal. They'll just take, you know,
A rough estimate.
a rough estimate and not that big of a deal. But once again, totally depends on the lender. Okay, moving forward. All right, so the next one, cash equivalency. All right. Okay, so in this particular case, we've got an existing loan, all right? And so let's say that our existing loan is $100,000. Okay, once again, 12 payments per year. All right, and in this case, the interest rate on the loan, let's say, is 5% for 15 years. Okay, once again, start off, get our payment. Okay, $790.79. All right. So in this case, what we want to know is if we can assume another mortgage, or if we can assume this mortgage and the current mortgages are at 9%, what's the cash equivalent value of this existing assumable loan? Okay. So first of all, if market value of interest rates is 9%, oops, hold on, back up. Okay. If the market value of the interest rates is currently at 9%, okay, and what we are interested in is, in essence, what the, yeah, make sure. Right. Percent. Yeah, okay, sorry. Okay, so the difference between these two, $223.48, all right, and in this case, once again, we take that difference of the $233.48, put that in as a payment for 15 years, and then apply basically the 9% as the prevailing rate, solve for present value.
It's 223, right?
I'm sorry, 223.
Would that be a negative payment?
You can, but you don't have to. Okay. So 223.48 as a payment, 15 years, 9%, present value, 22,033.65. And so this one is just simply looking at it, it's the same exact problem as the other one, but just in a slightly different context of what they're asking for. In this one, it's assuming that you have a loan that potentially can be assumed, which is the 5% loan, all right? And the current market rate is 9%. What is the value, if you will, of that existing assumable loan? Sort of the cash equivalent value. It'd be $22,000. So that's all they're really asking. Basically, same exact setup as the other problem. It's just a question of what it is they're asking for. Okay? All right. Moving forward.
How would you word this question, Dr. Forty?
You have an existing loan at a 5% interest rate, and the prevailing interest rate is 9%. What is the cash equivalent value of the existing loan? Okay. All right. Let's see. The last topic on this one, wraparounds. Okay. All right, this one's a little bit more interesting, somewhat similar stuff. Here, you typically are going to have an existing loan, and maybe you've paid down this loan for a few years, but then you've decided to get a second mortgage, okay? Because maybe the value of your property has gone up substantially over a period of years and you want to take advantage of that extra value. And so instead of getting a home equity loan, you decide to get what is called a wraparound loan. Now, the way this works is assume that I'm the lender, the primary lender. I have lent you whatever, $100,000. You've paid down that loan maybe over a couple of years. And then all of a sudden the market value of your home has escalated to maybe a couple $100,000. So you go and you find basically what's called a wrap lender. The wrap lender is going to issue you a loan for a much higher dollar amount. But here's the thing. They are then going to make the payments to me for the original loan. Okay? And that's why it's called a wraparound, because basically you're going to keep the existing loan, but then this new lender is going to wrap around it, and you're going to only have to make one payment to the wrap lender, okay? And then they will subsequently make the payment to me for the original loan. Does that make sense conceptually?
So that means it's not like an equity loan?
No, it's not an equity loan. Once again, the reason why the wrap lender is doing this is because it's a way to ensure that the primary mortgage is still being paid. They don't want to take the chance of you basically paying them, but then not paying the original lender.
So we as a consumer are looking for a wraparound loan?
You are looking for the wraparound loan.
And the reason is?
Because you want to, in essence, borrow more money out of your property.
So it would be the same almost as an equity, right? Because
No, it's different. It's different because it's not necessarily, it's maybe, it could be a totally different lender, and they're not, the difference with the equity loan, the equity loan is going to be a standalone loan, separate and apart completely from the primary mortgage.
Okay.
Whereas the wrap loan, they're going to basically marry them together.
So they're going to assume the responsibility
Yes.
of the last mortgage
Yes.
to the lender?
Yes,
Okay.
that's the difference. Okay. So, in this case, let's say that we've got a $200,000 mortgage and an interest rate of 7% and a term of 15 years. So start off, let's get our payment.
per year?
Yep. Okay, so that gives us 1797.66. Okay. Now, in this case, we've got this other loan, the existing loan. This is the wrap loan. The existing loan is 100,000 at a 5% interest rate for 20 years. So first of all, get the payment for that. Okay, but 5 years have passed on this original loan, the $100,000 loan, so we've got to find the balance at the end of that 5 years. Okay, and that's going to give us 83,454.86. Okay. Now what we've got to do is we've got to find out what the difference is between the two payments. Okay, so let's do that. So the 1797.66, subtract out the 659.96. And we get 1137.70 as the difference. Okay? Now, in this case, what we've got to do is we've got to put that in as the payment amount. Okay, so all of a sudden, everything is looking very similar to what we've done before, but we're going to add another step. All right, so that becomes our payment. That payment is going to be good for 15 years. Okay? But the thing that we have to do here is we've got to take the 200,000, subtract out the outstanding balance of the 83,454.86, which is going to give us $116,545.14. That is going to become our present value. Okay, we've got to probably put that one in, put something in as a negative. So we're going to put that in as a negative, present value. And then we're going to simply solve for what is our effective cost of borrowing for the wrap loan. Okay. And so what we end up with is an effective cost of borrowing for the wrap loan of 8.35%. Now, what else does this look similar to in terms of the kind of problem set up? Somewhat similar. Sort of the cost of two loans, also the incremental cost of borrowing, you know, that sort of thing. What I'm hoping that you're beginning to see are, you know, parallels between some of these things, because it's just little minor differences in terms of the setup, okay, and what it is you're looking for. And in some cases, what you're actually looking for is maybe the same, but the way that you're sort of looking at it or the way that you're approaching it, you know, may change just a little bit, okay? Yep.
Give us also a sample of like a question that would like,
Okay.
you kind of get.
It's very, very straightforward. You have an original loan of $100,000 at, you know, 5%, 20-year term, and you've paid down the loan over the past 5 years. You are able to secure a wrap loan for $200,000 at 7% for 15 years. What's the effective cost of borrowing of the wrap loan? Okay. All right. Moving forward. All right. Buy down loans. Okay. Now this one can get a bit dicey and a bit controversial because of how sometimes it gets utilized. Quite common in the past with a lot of condo developers. And what is being done here is you have a condo developer, you can use them as an example, that says, all right, we've got some condos that we're going to put up for sale. We've got, a whole tower or, whatever of condos, and we're wanting to attract buyers to our condo project, and we're trying to maximize the value that they will pay for those condos to us. So as an incentive to get the first few sales kind of on the books, what the lender may do, or what the developer may do, is get a preferred lender sort of set up and established, and ask that lender, okay, what's the prevailing rate of interest that you're going to charge? And then the condo developer will say, okay, I am going to buy down that rate from wherever it is by a couple of percentage points. Well, think about that. What that is instantly going to do is that's going to mean that a handful of things are going to kind of domino effect from that. One is that's going to put upward pressure on the base price of the units, because the effective out of cost will be the same whether they get the below market cost of financing with a higher price on the property, or they go out and they get more traditional financing at a lower price on the property. But it's also going to have potentially another impact, especially if the appraisers in the market aren't doing their job, is it's going to give some artificial higher price points for those first few unit sales. Okay? You follow what I'm saying? Okay, most of you do. All right. The reason it's going to give that artificial boost is because you're offering the below market financing. All right, so let's give an example here. All right, 12 payments per year.
You said initially, so does that carry over after the first couple units?
And that is an excellent question, because usually what happens is, this is the sort of thing, it maybe sets the price initially, and then the first few buyers kind of, sort of take advantage of the initial good deal, but then the ones that follow that, may inherently get screwed, okay? And that's the part that is what I'm saying.
Because they're not getting the rate?
They're not going to get the rate, and they're paying more for the units than they're really worth.
I see.
Okay? So, once again, we'll assume a $100,000 loan. In this case, we'll assume the normal interest rate is 10% for 30 years, and we get our monthly payment, and I know that's going to be $877.57, but I'll do it anyway. Okay. All right, so $877.57. That is the normal rate. Now, the developer wants to buy down that rate to, let's say, 8%. Okay, so we're going to calculate what would be the new payment at 8%. Okay. And now the question is, how many years are they willing to maybe buy down that loan or buy down the interest rate? Could be a couple of years, could be you know, 5 years, totally depends. So let's just say they buy it down for 5 years. So the buy down interest for 5 years, okay? Now, here's the way that now this one is be twisted in a different way. First of all, what is the purchaser of the property going to pay in terms of their interest rate? Tell me. No.
The 8?
Yes. The purchaser is going to pay at the 8% rate for the first 5 years. Then it's going to jump up to 10% thereafter, okay? But for the first 5 years, it's going to be at the 8%. But, so how does the developer buy down this interest rate? Because the lender still needs to get 10%. You follow me?
Yeah, he has to buy 2%.
He has to buy down, but how much does the developer have to pay to be able to do that is the question, okay? Does that make sense? In other words, you've got this difference, okay, so 877, 57, minus that, 143, 81 is the difference, yes? Okay, so now what's going to take place is basically taking that difference, putting that in as a payment amount, and then saying, okay, that's going to be good for 5 years, okay, and we want to make sure that the lender is getting the full 10%, and then we're going to solve for present value. Okay, 143.81, so minus payment, 5 shift in, 10% interest rate, so 6,768.47. Okay? Does that make sense? So what has to happen? Let's just make sure that we're clear on this. At the beginning of all of this, the developer is writing a check to the lender for $6,768.17. Okay? That is allowing the lender to lower the interest rate to 8%, but still maintain their yield of the 10%. Does that make sense? Now, what could also happen, as a potentially matter of practice, is the developer, instead of paying all that money up front, they could obviously just work out an arrangement with the lender that they're going to pay the difference of the 143.81 every month for the next 60 months. But if they did that, if you sort of do the math, that times 60 would be 8,628.60. So if the developer has access to the cash, they'd probably much rather go ahead and just only have to pay the 67.68 as opposed to paying it out over the next 5 years. Okay, depending on what their cost of borrowing is. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. But the interesting piece about this, that it would sort of be a follow-on to this, beyond inherently the scope of the question, but in essence, this would technically allow the developer to add an additional $6,000 on top of whatever the price is on the property, and all other things being equal. Does that make sense? In other words, let's just say $100,000 is the full asking price of the property originally. They could technically now say the property is really $106,768.47, and that would, in essence, from an out-of-pocket perspective, be equivalent for a buyer to going out and getting the 10% loan versus getting the special deal of the 8%. Okay, so what might more mechanically happen as a matter of practice is they probably would just simply say, okay, we're going to charge them an extra $5,000, okay, and you know, so the asking price is gonna be 105,000, they're gonna eat that 1,700, but, what they're doing, and I'm not in any way, shape, form, or fashion advocating this for the tape, that what they're really doing is they're inflating artificially the value of the property by that $5,000, so that the initial price point on the property, instead of it initially selling at $100,000 a unit, it's selling at $105,000 a unit. Well, if that catches on and appraisers are not doing a good job of looking at the actual financing of these deals, what will then happen is over time the price point will stick at the 105,000, meaning that for many subsequent units that may not be getting the special financing, the developer's going to be pocketing an extra $5,000 per unit above and beyond the base price. Does that make sense? Okay.
There's also the difference between the 8,000 and 6,000 because the time, the duration is the same, right? Both are like 60 months.
Well, but this is discounted by the 10% because you're paying it all up front, whereas the 8,000 is being paid monthly for 5 years.
2% is extra added to that, right?
Well,
Approximately.
something like that, yeah. Okay. All right, that takes us through the first part. Okay, so let's do the first little quiz, get that out of the way. Okay, you got a new answer sheet, so make sure you get your name on it. Oh, hold on, I gave you quiz 6, not quiz 4. Try that again. Okay. And the other one.
Thank you.
So the revised time estimate about 9:20, roughly. Question 3 is a really simple question. Don't overthink it, okay? It's just looking for the difference in the payments times 25 years.
Are we assuming monthly for that one?
Yes. got about 5, 10 more minutes.
Have any
You
questions?
guys are really taking way too much time on some of these problems. If I were you, I would skip down to questions 6 through 10, the ones that we just covered today, because those will probably be a little bit easier. Okay, but 2 or 3 more minutes. Actually, keep your paper, it's fine. Okay, I've got 9:30, keep your papers, okay, let me explain what we're gonna do. All right, you're gonna keep those, and you're gonna have the opportunity to work on them some more a little bit later, but right now, we're gonna go ahead and start with the new material, okay? All right, so chapter 9, this is basically all about leases. This, and I, honest to God, and I'm not making this up, this is the easiest quiz of the book, okay? There's one coming up, yes, okay? So I'm not, I swear, I am not making that up, it is an honest truth.
What's
okay?
easy for you is very different.
No,
What's easy for us.
it's very little time value of money, it's almost all addition and subtraction, okay? All right, so the first topic with gross leases, we have talked a little bit about gross leases, but in essence, gross leases are normally kind of an all bills paid sort of situation, all right? Where you as the tenant go to a landlord and you pay some sort of a base rate, you know, for the space, which typically includes utilities and that sort of thing. Okay, but what we in many cases want to sort of find out is what is the actual amount of sort of net revenue or you know, real income that the owner of the property is actually receiving, okay? And so that's kind of the purpose of this particular problem and particular sort of concept. We've got a base lease of $40 per square foot per year for the property with annual step-ups of $3 per square foot per year. What that means is every single year for the lease, the base rate is going to go up by $3 a year. Does that make sense, everybody? So year 1 is going to be $40 a square foot. Year 2 would be $43. Year 3 would be $46, and so forth, so on. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. Then we're also going to add in what is referred to as an expense stop. Okay? Now, this is a concept that if you've never heard this concept before, you definitely need to understand this concept because a lot of people don't understand this concept. It's a fairly simple concept, but a lot of people don't quite grasp it. What it basically boils down to is this. With a $15 per square foot per year expense stop, that means that the tenant is going to have to pay any expenses above and beyond the $15 per square foot. Okay? In other words, the landowner or landlord will take on the responsibility of the first $15 of expenses, but if the tenant happens to be someone that consumes a ridiculous amount of electricity, a ridiculous amount of water, a ridiculous amount of whatever other services may be offered on premises, once that cost exceeds $15 per square foot, the tenant will be responsible. That way, the reason for that is so that the landlord can lock in basically a fixed return. Does that make sense? Okay? And that's really the only purpose of it, is just so that you don't end up, and usually most landlords are going to give reasonable sort of amounts for those expense stops. But it's only in those cases where you have kind of the greedy tenant that, that this would ever be exceeded. Okay, does that make sense? Now, what does that then mean that the net would be for the property owner, let's say in year 2? Okay? So in year 2 of this property, the owner's going to be receiving $43 in rent, yes? But they're going to be responsible for, the owner of the property is for that first 15, so you're going to subtract out the 15, and that's going to leave you with what?
28.
Okay? $28 per square foot per year would be the net that you would be receiving as the property owner. Everybody cool with that? Okay, it's as simple as that. Don't make it more complicated, okay?
So the $3 starts after year 1?
Yeah.
Yes. So for year 1, it would just be 40 minus 15, but for year 2, it's going to be 40 plus the 3 minus the 15. For year 3, it'll be 40 plus 3 plus 3 minus the 15.
Is this type of setup more common in like
Office buildings.
okay.
So the first year is going to be 43, second year is going to be 28.
For the home.
No.
First year is gonna be
Okay.
35, 25.
Okay. So
That is
year 1 is going to be 40 plus, minus 15, so basically 25. Year 2 is going to be 43 minus 15, or 28. Year 3, 46 minus 15, or 30, what, 2? 45 plus
31.
3, 31, yeah, 31. Okay? Make sense? Okay, moving forward. Okay, the next topic, okay. You've got a net lease with CPI adjustments. Consumer Price Index. Those of you that are not familiar with what the Consumer Price Index is, look it up. It's basically the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They, on a national level, collects data about the sort of a basket of goods and services, and that basically basket of goods and services is kind of consistent over time in terms of what's included within it. And in essence, it's sort of like saying it's everything from like the price of bread to basically the cost of gas per gallon to a whole number of other things that kind of all get lumped into one singular index. But they can then say, from one year to the next, has that basket of goods gone up or down, and then use that as a metric of what the real cost of living might be. So in this particular case, what you may have is a net lease with a base rate that then has an escalation or de-escalation depending on what the Consumer Price Index is from one year to the next. Does that make sense? Okay, so in this case, we'll keep it relatively simple. Let's say that we've got a base lease rate of $20 per square foot per year, and CPI basically at end of year 1 is going to be, let's say, 3%. At end of year 2 is going to be, 2%. Okay? So what you would do is just simply, so year 1, your lease rate is going to be the $20. But for year 2, you're going to multiply it by 1 plus the 3%. So So for year 2, your lease rate's gonna be $20.60. Year 3, you're gonna multiply it by 1.02, so 2101. So this is year 1, year 2, year 3. Does that make sense? Okay? Any questions on that? Okay, moving forward. Okay. Average net rent. Okay, so let's say that we've got a property with a 5-year lease term.